The night was cold, and the wind howled through the dense forest. Ethan Carter adjusted his backpack and tightened his jacket. He had lived alone in these mountains for years, far from the noise of the city. He enjoyed the silence, the peace, and the simplicity of survival. But tonight, something felt different. As he walked through the trees, his sharp eyes caught a faint blue glow in the distance. At first, he thought it was just the reflection of the moon on the wet ground, but then he noticed smoke rising from the same direction. His instincts kicked in. Something had crashed. Curious but cautious, he made his way toward the light. When he arrived, he stopped in shock. The wrecked alien pod lay half buried in the dirt, metal still hot and steaming from the impact. The strange craft was unlike anything he had ever seen, sleek, curved, and covered in markings that didn't look human. Then he saw her. A figure lay motionless a few feet away from the wreckage. A girl, but not human. Her body was covered in a thin, shimmering armor, but it was cracked and broken in places. Her skin was a pale violet, her silver hair messy and stained with blood. A deep gash ran across her forehead, and her breathing was weak. Ethan took a cautious step closer. She was alive, but barely. His first instinct was to turn back. This was alien. This wasn't his problem. But then he looked at her face again. She looked young, afraid, and vulnerable. Whoever she was, she had been left here to die. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. "I must be crazy," he muttered to himself before kneeling beside her. Her body was light, almost unnaturally so, as he carefully lifted her into his arms. Her breathing was shallow, and a small pained noise escaped her lips as he moved her. She was injured badly. If he left her here, she wouldn't last the night. "All right, let's get you out of here," he said, more to himself than to her. He carried her through the forest, his strong arms barely feeling the weight. His cabin wasn't far, but he kept checking over his shoulder. What if someone, or something, was looking for her? When he finally reached his home, he kicked open the door and laid her on the small bed in the corner. His cabin was simple but warm, stocked with supplies. He moved quickly, gathering his medical kit and a wet cloth. As he cleaned the wound on her forehead, she stirred slightly. Her eyes fluttered open, glowing a soft gold. For a brief second, those alien eyes locked onto his, filled with confusion and fear. She tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. She spoke in a strange, broken voice, words he couldn't understand. "Hey, take it easy," Ethan said, raising his hands to show he wasn't a threat. "You're safe. I'm helping you." She blinked at him, her breathing unsteady. Then, as if the effort of staying awake was too much, her eyes closed again, and she fell back into unconsciousness. Ethan exhaled. This was a bad idea. He had no idea who or what she was, and if she had enemies, he didn't want to be caught in the middle of an alien war. But something inside him wouldn't let him walk away. Whatever had happened to her, she had been left behind, abandoned. Ethan knew what that felt like. He wasn't going to let her die alone. Ethan Carter sat on the wooden chair beside the bed, watching the unconscious alien girl. The soft glow of the lantern cast long shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, the wind howled, shaking the trees. But inside, everything was still, except for the girl's shallow breathing. She had been asleep for hours. Her body was weak, but the worst of her wounds were now bandaged. Ethan had done his best with what little medical supplies he had, but he wasn't sure if human medicine would work on an alien body. As he leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes, he heard a soft sound, a small groan. Ethan turned quickly. The girl's eyes fluttered open, glowing that same golden hue he had seen before. For a moment, she just stared at the ceiling, her breathing unsteady. Then, suddenly, her gaze locked onto him. She pushed herself up in an instant, trying to move away, but her weak body betrayed her. A sharp pain shot through her side, and she collapsed back onto the bed. "Easy," Ethan said, raising his hands in a calm gesture. You're safe." She didn't understand. He could tell by the way her eyes narrowed, her body tense. She was afraid. Ethan grabbed a metal cup from the table, poured some water, and offered it to her, a peace offering. She stared at the cup, then at him. Slowly, with shaky hands, she took it. She sniffed the water carefully before taking a small sip. For the first time, Ethan saw something change in her expression, caution turning into curiosity. "Can you understand me?" he asked. She didn't respond but tilted her head slightly. Then, in a voice soft and strange, she spoke. "Where?" Ethan sat up, surprised. She knew some human words. "You're in my cabin. I found you in the forest," he explained, pointing toward the door. "You were hurt. I helped you." She blinked slowly, as if trying to process his words. Her gaze dropped to her bandaged arm, and she touched it gently. "You help me?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, I couldn't just leave you there." She stared at him again, this time longer. Confused, suspicious. Then her expression changed. She looked down, her fingers tightening around the cup. Her breathing became uneven. She was remembering something painful. Ethan didn't push. Instead, he stood up and walked toward the fireplace, throwing in another log. "You hungry?" he asked. No response. He took out a metal pot and poured in some water, adding a few pieces of dried meat and vegetables. The smell of hot soup filled the small cabin. When he turned back, she was watching him closely, her glowing eyes fixed on his every move. "I don't know what you eat," he admitted, "but this is all I have." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. Eat. It was a simple word, but Ethan understood. A few minutes later, he placed a bowl of warm soup in front of her. She looked at it, then at him. She lifted the spoon with unsteady fingers and took a small sip. Her eyes widened slightly. "Surprise." "Good?" Ethan asked, amused. She swallowed and nodded once. "Warm." Ethan smirked. "Yeah, helps in the cold." For a while, they ate in silence. The tension in the room faded, replaced by something different. Not trust, not yet, but something close. When she finished, she placed the bowl down carefully. Then, for the first time, she spoke a full sentence. "I am Salvera." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Salvera." She nodded. "My name." Ethan leaned back, crossing his arms. "Well, Salvera, I'm Ethan." She studied him for a long moment before finally whispering, "Ethan." It was the first time she had said his name, and for some reason, it felt like a step forward. But before Ethan could say anything else, a sudden faint hum echoed from outside the cabin. Ethan's body went still. Salvera's eyes widened in fear. Something, or someone, was out there. The hum outside the cabin grew louder. It was low, steady, unnatural, like something hovering just beyond the trees. Ethan's muscles tensed. He had lived in this remote forest for years, and he had never heard anything like this before. Across the room, Salvera was shaking. Her glowing golden eyes flickered with fear as she gripped the edge of the blanket. Her entire body was stiff, like a hunted animal sensing danger nearby. "Who's out there?" Ethan whispered. Salvera's lips parted, but she didn't speak. Instead, she wrapped her arms around herself, eyes darting toward the door. She knew. Ethan's heart pounded. If they were looking for her, they wouldn't knock and wait for an answer. They would break in. Moving quickly, Ethan grabbed his old hunting rifle from the wall. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He turned to Salvera. "Can you move?" She hesitated, then tried to push herself up. But the moment she put weight on her injured leg, she gasped and fell back onto the bed. Ethan cursed under his breath. She was in no condition to run. The humming noise shifted, moving closer. Then, the shadows outside the window shifted. Something was out there. Ethan exhaled sharply. If they wanted her, they'd have to go through him first. The doorknob rattled. Salvera grabbed Ethan's sleeve, her fingers digging into his arm. Her skin was ice cold. "Don't," she whispered. "They will kill you." Ethan gave her a small, reassuring glance. "Not if I kill them first." A deep, metallic voice spoke from the other side of the door. "Open. Now." Ethan didn't answer. He raised the rifle, stepping back to shield Salvera behind him. Silence. Then, bang! The door shook violently as something slammed against it. Dust fell from the ceiling. Salvera's breathing became fast and uneven. Bang! A second hit, harder this time. The wooden frame splintered. Ethan tightened his grip on the rifle. If they broke through, he'd have one shot before they were on him. The humming outside intensified. Salvera suddenly clawed at his arm. "No, they have." Crack! The door was ripped open. A tall figure stepped inside. Its body was sleek, armored, and inhuman. Black metallic plates covered its frame, and its eyes glowed with a dim blue light. The creature was twice Ethan's size, and in its hand, it held a weapon that pulsed with a faint, eerie energy. A second figure followed, then a third. 3 of them. Ethan raised his rifle. The first alien tilted its head slightly, then took a step forward. Salvera gasped. "No, don't fight them." Ethan didn't listen. He pulled the trigger. Boom! The shot echoed through the cabin. Smoke curled from the barrel. The bullet hit the armored alien in the chest, but it didn't fall. Instead, the creature staggered back slightly, then straightened. Ethan's stomach twisted. The bullet had barely done anything. The alien raised its own weapon and fired. A blue energy blast shot across the room, hitting the wall just inches from Ethan's head. The wooden panels exploded into splinters. Ethan stumbled back, shielding Salvera. The lead alien spoke, its voice a deep metallic growl. "You cannot protect her, human." Ethan clenched his jaw. He was outgunned, outmatched, and standing in front of someone who was clearly being hunted. But he wasn't about to let them take her. His mind raced. He had to think fast. The cabin was small, with only one exit. If he fought, he would lose. But if he ran... His eyes flicked to the trapdoor near the fireplace, the old root cellar. He turned to Salvera, voice low. "Can you crawl?" She nodded, eyes wide with understanding. "Good." Another blue blast ripped through the cabin, setting the wooden floor ablaze. Smoke curled up, filling the air with heat and ash. The lead alien stepped forward again. "Step aside." Ethan glared. Not happening. In a swift motion, he grabbed the lantern from the table and threw it at the floor. Glass shattered. Fire spread. Flames exploded outward, blocking the alien's path for a moment. It was now or never. Ethan grabbed Salvera and dragged her toward the trapdoor. She winced in pain but didn't resist. He threw open the hatch, the darkness below deep and unwelcoming. No time to hesitate. With one last look at the burning cabin, Ethan and Salvera dropped into the underground tunnel. The hatch slammed shut above them. And in the suffocating darkness, only one question remained. How far could they run? Ethan landed hard on the cold ground below, his shoulder slamming against the damp earth. The root cellar was small and cramped, filled with the smell of dust and rotting wood. Above, the cabin burned. Flames crackled, and alien voices shouted in a language Ethan couldn't understand. Beside him, Salvera groaned in pain. She had landed awkwardly, her injured leg twisting beneath her. Ethan quickly pulled her up, whispering, "We have to move." Salvera's breathing was unsteady, but she nodded. She understood. Ethan grabbed an old lantern from the wall and lit it. A faint orange glow flickered, revealing the narrow tunnel ahead. His grandfather had dug this passage decades ago, fearing the day he might need an escape. Ethan had never imagined he would be running for his life down this path, with an alien girl who was being hunted. Behind them, Heavy footsteps stomped across the burning floor. The aliens were searching. Salvera shivered, her voice barely above a whisper. "They will find us." Ethan shook his head. "Not if we keep moving." He led the way, holding the lantern high. The tunnel walls were rough, lined with old wooden beams to prevent collapse. It wasn't perfect, but it would hold, at least for now. Salvera limped beside him, biting her lip to keep from crying out. Ethan could tell she was struggling, but they couldn't afford to stop. They walked in silence, the only sounds being their footsteps and the distant muffled chaos above. Then Salvera suddenly froze. Her breathing hitched. Her entire body went rigid. Ethan turned to her. "What's wrong?" She didn't answer. Instead, her glowing golden eyes flicked toward the lantern in his hand, then further ahead, into the darkness. Ethan followed her gaze, and his stomach turned cold. Something was moving in the tunnel ahead. It was faint, just beyond the edge of the lantern's glow, but Ethan saw it, a shadow shifting. He instinctively raised the rifle, finger on the trigger. Silence. Salvera gripped his arm. "Not them." Ethan frowned. "Then what?" Before she could answer, a low growl echoed from the darkness. Ethan's pulse spiked. There was something down here with them. The growl turned into a wet, clicking sound. Salvera's voice shook. "We must leave. Now." Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed her hand and pulled her forward. They moved faster, ignoring the pain, the exhaustion, and the fear. Behind them, the growling grew louder. Whatever was in the tunnel, it was following them. Ethan refused to look back. The tunnel sloped downward, and soon the walls became damp. The air smelled of old water and earth. Then, Ethan saw it. The exit. A wooden door, partially covered in dirt, stood at the end of the tunnel. Beyond it was the forest, their chance to escape. Ethan rushed forward, pushing the door open. Cold air hit his face. He turned back to Salvera, only to see her stumble. Her body froze, her eyes wide with terror. Ethan's breath caught. From the tunnel's darkness, a creature emerged. It was tall, pale, and twisted. Its body was skeletal, its limbs too long, its mouth filled with jagged, uneven teeth. It wasn't one of the aliens hunting her. It was something worse. The creature's hollow eyes locked onto them. Salvera whimpered. "It followed me." Ethan's grip tightened on his rifle. "You know what that thing is?" She didn't answer, but the fear in her eyes said everything. The creature stepped forward, slowly, carefully. It was hunting them. Ethan didn't hesitate. He fired. Boom! The bullet tore through the creature's chest. For a moment, it didn't move. Then, slowly, it tilted its head. Ethan's stomach dropped. It wasn't dead. And now, it was angry. Salvera grabbed his wrist. "Run." Ethan didn't argue. They rushed out into the forest, leaving the tunnel behind. But the growl that followed them into the night made one thing clear. They weren't safe yet. Branches scratched his arms, and his boots sank into the wet earth, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Salvera was beside him, struggling to keep up, her injured legs slowing her down. Behind them, the creature chased. Its inhuman growl echoed through the dark forest, sending a chill down Ethan's spine. He risked a glance back, and his breath caught. The thing was fast. Its long limbs moved with an unnatural grace, its hollow eyes fixed on them like a predator locking onto its prey. We won't outrun it, Ethan realized. Salvera's breathing was heavy. She was exhausted. She wouldn't last much longer. Ethan's mind raced. Think. He couldn't let it end like this. Then, he saw it. A steep drop ahead. The land fell away into a ravine, with jagged rocks below. A dead end. Salvera slowed, panic in her glowing eyes. We are trapped. Ethan clenched his jaw. No, not yet. He scanned the area. There had to be something. The creature closed in. Its heavy footsteps thumped against the forest floor. Closer, closer. Ethan saw an opening. A fallen tree stretched across the ravine. It was old, its bark stripped away by time, but it might hold their weight. Ethan grabbed Salvera's hand. "Trust me." She hesitated for only a second before nodding. Together, they ran toward the log. The creature snarled behind them. Ethan reached the edge first. Without thinking, he jumped onto the log and ran. The wood creaked beneath his boots, but it held. Salvera followed, her movements shaky but determined. Halfway across, the creature lunged. It leaped onto the log, its claws digging into the rotting wood. The whole tree shuddered. Ethan turned, rifle raised. The creature hissed, its hollow eyes locked onto him. It took a step forward. Crack! The wood split. Ethan's stomach lurched. The log was breaking. No time. He grabbed Salvera's arm and yanked her forward. They jumped. For a terrifying second, they were weightless. Then, hard ground slammed into Ethan's body. His breath left him in a painful gasp. Beside him, Salvera groaned but was alive. Ethan rolled onto his back, heart pounding. The log, gone. The creature, falling. It let out a shriek as it tumbled into the ravine, its long limbs flailing. Then, silence. Ethan's chest heaved. His hands shook. They had won. For now. Salvera turned to him, her face pale. "It will come back." Ethan swallowed. He had a feeling she was right. And that scared him more than anything. Ethan sat beside the small campfire, his hands still trembling from their narrow escape. The warmth of the flames barely reached him, but he wasn't cold because of the night air. The fear still clung to him. Across from him, Salvera sat in silence, staring at the fire. Her normally radiant golden eyes were dim, filled with exhaustion and something deeper, pain. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then softly she whispered, "It wasn't the first time." Ethan frowned. "What?" She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "The creature. I have seen it before, when I was a child." Ethan leaned forward. "You knew what was chasing us." Salvera nodded slowly. "I did not want to believe it, but yes, it is called a Nivok. My people told stories about them. Stories I thought were just myths. But now, I know the truth." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "Tell me." She hesitated again, then spoke. "When I was young, my people lived in a colony far from here. We were a proud race, strong and skilled in battle. But one day, the Nivok came. One by one, our warriors disappeared. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just gone. My father, our leader, swore to protect us. He led a hunt into the deep woods to find the monster. Asterisk, asterisk. She swallowed hard. He never returned." Ethan's fingers curled into fists. "So you've been running from this thing your whole life?" Salvera's expression hardened. "No, I stopped running a long time ago. I believed it was gone, that my people had finally killed it. But now," she shook her head, "it is still here." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Then we finish this." She blinked. "What?" Ethan stood, checking his rifle. "We can't keep running forever. That thing won't stop. We need to take it down." Salvera studied him for a moment, then slowly nodded. "You are a strange human." He smirked. "You have no idea." The plan. By morning, they had a plan. They followed the ravine, looking for tracks. It wasn't long before they found deep claw marks in the dirt. The Nivok had survived the fall. Salvera traced the markings with her fingers. "It is wounded, but not dead." Ethan nodded. "Then we make sure it doesn't get another chance." They moved carefully, using the trees for cover. Every step felt heavier. The air was thick, as if the forest itself was warning them to turn back. Then they found the cave. A gaping hole in the earth, dark as a starless sky. The walls were lined with strange, carved symbols, alien, ancient. Salvera's breath hitched. This is not just a cave. It is a tomb. Ethan glanced at her. What do you mean? She pointed at the symbols. These are the markings of my ancestors. This place, it was meant to keep the Nivok locked away. Ethan exhaled. Guess that didn't work out. A deep growl echoed from inside. They froze. The shadows inside shifted. Then, two glowing eyes opened. The Nivok was waiting. The Nivok's eyes burned like twin embers in the dark. A deep growl echoed from the cave, vibrating through the air. It was waiting for them. Ethan gripped his rifle tightly, his heart hammering. Salvera stood beside him, her golden eyes sharp and focused. There was no turning back now. Ethan whispered, "We finish this." Salvera nodded. Together. Then, they stepped into the darkness. Inside the tomb. The cave swallowed them in silence. The only light came from the eerie glow of the ancient symbols on the walls. The air was thick, heavy, almost alive. Ethan could hear the Nivok's slow, deep breathing. It was close. He raised his rifle, scanning the darkness. Nothing. Then, a sudden blur. The Nivok lunged from the shadows. Ethan barely had time to react. He rolled aside, the creature's claws slamming into the ground where he had stood. Dust exploded into the air. Salvera moved fast, her blade flashing. She struck, slicing at the Nivok's side. The beast let out a monstrous screech and whipped around, knocking her backward. Ethan cursed. Salvera. She hit the ground hard, but she was alive. The Nivok turned to Ethan. Its hollow eyes glowed brighter, filled with rage. Ethan took a step back, his finger tightening on the trigger. No more running. Bang, bang, bang. 3 shots. Direct hits. The Nivok staggered but didn't fall. Instead, it roared and charged. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Too fast. The creature swung its massive arm. But before it could strike, Salvera leaped onto its back. She drove her blade deep into its shoulder, snarling. The Nivok let out a pained shriek, twisting violently to shake her off. But she held on. Ethan saw his chance. He aimed carefully. The Nivok *** threw Salvera off. ***, and in that instant, Ethan fired. Bang! The bullet struck the creature's skull. The Nivok froze. For a second, nothing happened. Then, it let out a final ear-piercing scream. The cave shook. The symbols on the walls flashed brighter, and the ground beneath the Nivok crumbled. With one last horrifying shriek, the monster fell into the abyss below. Gone. The cave went silent. Victory. Ethan and Salvera lay on the ground, breathing hard. Finally, Ethan let out a shaky laugh. Tell me the thing's not coming back. Salvera stared at the darkness where the Nivok had vanished. Then she placed a hand on the glowing symbols. The light dimmed as if the cave itself had accepted the battle was over. She exhaled. It is finished. Ethan sat up, rubbing his sore shoulder. Good, because I never want to do that again. Salvera turned to him, her gaze softening. You saved me. Ethan smirked. I had to. You still owe me a proper meal, remember? Salvera let out a small laugh, the first he had heard from her. For the first time since they met, she looked at peace. She extended her hand. Come, let us leave this cursed place. Ethan took it. Together, they walked out of the cave, stepping into the golden light of the rising sun. The nightmare was over, and a new journey was about to begin.